Hello there, it's Friday, which means it's time once again for the best movie podcast ever, the only movie podcast to offer, hold on, how's this beginning bit go again? Objective and hyperbole-free discussion of every movie in the known universe. I've done this 50 times, Anthony. This is episode 50 of the best movie podcast ever, and as is tradition, I have not improved one jot from when I did episode 1. I still can't remember the intro. I am your host, the podcaster with no name, Konrad, and with me as always, he's like a dreamer, rapidly like it's Anthony James.
Buongiorno, Konrad. How you doing?
I am bueno. I don't think that's Spanish, actually. Not Italian.
I'm not a linguist, so I have no idea.
Spanish and Italian are quite similar languages, so hopefully the Italian for good is similar to bueno. But yeah, I'm not too bad. We're talking about the House of Gucci, and it's not an exaggeration to say the performance of Jared Leto in that movie. Yeah. It's had the internet ablaze, and it's lived rent-free in my head for the last week or so. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. I'm surprised, to be honest with you. You told me that Jared Leto was in it. You told me that he sounded like Mario in it. When we watched it, actually, this is the first film that we're doing on this podcast, which Konrad and I went to the cinema to see together.
Yep, it's episode 50. It's a special occasion, and we marked it by going to the cinema together to watch this movie.
House of Gucci. Fantastic film. We'll get into it. Now, fantastic in not a traditional sense of the word fantastic, but we'll get into it. So I actually didn't know that Jared Leto was in this, and then you told me he was, and I'm going to be honest with you, if it wasn't for the accent and the fact that he sounded like Mario, I wouldn't have been able to tell it was him.
Yeah, he has undergone a prosthetic transformation, which we will dissect in minute detail because... everything about that performance needs to be analysed, I think it's safe to say. So, without further ado, let's talk about some gosh darn movies.
Let's do it.
Movies, let's talk about them. Before we get into House of Gucci, which we will talk about in length. At length. That's the way you say that. Yeah. I wanted to briefly mention that I started seeing some reviews. These might not interest you at all. This might just be me shouting into the void here. Okay. But I started seeing some reviews for Steven Spielberg's remake of West Side Story.
West Side Story, yeah.
That's coming out fairly soon, I think. Have you got any interest in seeing that?
I actually do have interest in seeing that. I love musicals, obviously, but the thing is, I've never actually seen West Side Story. Whether I should watch this, I don't know. I have flashbacks to my brother watching Les Miserables for the first time, the Russell Crowe version, or the Hooper version, I should say. And for a good 6 months, I couldn't convince him that it wasn't the best version. So I'm afraid of being that annoying person who thinks this is the best version of it. So I think maybe I'll quickly go and listen to the original cast or something first before I see it, just in case I turn into that annoying person.
Yeah, well, I mean, I believe in related sadder news that Stephen Sondheim wrote the music for it, who passed away this week, and it's great.
That's a cruel twist of fate, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But the music is brilliant. It's very. I like West Side Story a lot. You have to be in the right frame of mind to watch it, I think, because there's a school of musicals that are very sort of traditional. You've got like your kind of Fred Astaire or your what's his name from Singing in the Rain. Name's completely gone out of my head now, but the Gene Kelly Kelly musicals which are like much more kind of straight laced, and there's a lot of personality to them, but it's not. West Side Story kind of captures a jazziness that those don't have, and it can come across as really camp sometimes and really ridiculous. Like, kind of people be walking around like clicking and being like, "Keep it cool, Daddy-o," and it's like, okay, this is ridiculous, but in kind of a good way. But you have to be ready for that. But apparently, Steven Spielberg's remake is getting really good reviews. So, and I'll be honest, I was one of the people who, when it was announced, was very much like, why does this movie need to be remade? Like, what possible benefit could there be in it? But seems like he's done a good job.
But also, like, Spielberg, Gangs of New York, Jurassic Park, E.T. It's funny, like, I heard that he apparently has been trying to make this his whole career, and I'm just like, for like 20 years or something. I'm like, this is not the film I would have expected him to be sort of having on the back burner trying to get done, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know where it's been in his like priority list or why it's taken him this long, but it sounds like it's okay. So maybe he's done a good job of it. Hopefully it keeps the kind of camp jazziness, but gets rid of the brown face because that's difficult to watch.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, there's only one, I want to say, Hispanic actor or Latinx actor actually in the movie, and I believe they darkened her skin to match all the other white actors who they made wear brown face. So like, you don't look dark enough.
They actually made a non-white person go darker just to match the white people who were darker.
Because they're like, that's not a believable skin color for someone of your race.
We accidentally made the only non-white person look like the only white person.
Yeah, but they essentially doubled down on their racism. Like, not only did they like, you know, make white people wear brown face, but they insulted the one non-white person in the fucking movie. But it's still a great movie. It's It's just, you know, it's a product of its time to a certain extent.
Well, I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, well, so this week, let's get into it. We're talking about House of Gucci. Now, I don't know how much you've been keeping up with Ridley Scott's latest war of words with just anyone, really. He's just a bit of a cantankerous old man these days and will get very cross about the most minor things.
Superman, is it superhero movies again?
No. So this time round, it's millennials.
Of course it is. Avocado toast?
No, so he spent the last few weeks raging about how millennials ruined the box office for The Last Duel, which I think was only in cinemas in the UK for about 24 hours, because it completely passed me by that it had come out. But he's raging against them because they want to consume everything on their phones now. So it's a millennials' fault.
I think actually, okay, it's interesting that they're still using the word millennials, because
I'm a millennial.
I think they mean Zoomers, and even then I don't agree, because they still go to the cinema. But I think he means Zoomers. Anyone younger than like a 50-year-old is a millennial.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very much like how everyone older than like 25 is a boomer in the like to actual boomers like Ridley Scott. Anyone like younger than them is a millennial, despite the fact that admittedly I'm an old millennial, but technically speaking, I a 34-year-old man am a millennial, and I can tell you right now, I could watch a movie without looking at my phone. Ridley.
Wrigley.
Old Wrigley. It's weird as well, because loads of other movies seem to have done fine recently. So I don't know. Maybe it's the quality of the film or the
it's your own fault. Like, even in your own planning for it, you realized it wasn't going to be any good at the box office. It's already on Disney Plus. It's already on Disney Plus. So that's how bad they thought it was going to do. They planned for this. But I will say as well, my biggest pet peeve of old people slagging off millennials or Zoomers or whatever is the fact that every single old person I have ever known, boomer I shall say, every single one I have ever known, when they are given the technology and the chance to do what they slag off the younger generations to do, they will do it tenfold. Have you ever seen the father of the family who's now like 60 years old, who finally gets his first smartphone? He treats the family group chats like a 25-year-old woman treats Facebook. It's exactly the same and way more cringe. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, Ridley. So basically, what we're saying is we need to get Ridley Scott on TikTok, because he will love it.
Yeah, he'll love it. Yeah.
So an interesting. Last Duel, financial failure, whatever. Ridley Scott's a grumpy old man. Still makes good movies, but I stopped listening to what Ridley Scott had to say about anything outside of his films a long time ago. He, interestingly, I don't know if you're aware of this, because I don't think you've seen it either, but he insisted that no one in The Last Duel attempt a French accent, despite it being a movie about French knights. Presumably because it would sound ridiculous, which makes his decision, and I'm not gonna. This is me priming the pump here. I'm not gonna talk about it just yet, because we've got to hold off on talking about Jared Leto, or we'll talk about nothing else. But it makes his decision to presumably give carte blanche to Jared Leto to turn in the performance he did in the House of Gucci baffling. I think it's fair to say. The same director who was like Matt Damon, what's his name? Kylo Ren, Adam Driver. Matt Damon and Adam Driver you don't attempt accents in this movie. It'll sound ridiculous. Jared Leto, I love what you're doing there. Carry on with that.
It's so interesting, actually. Now that you say that, I didn't actually fully. Obviously, I was weird that there was 2 Ridley Scott films in the cinema within a month. But what's even weirder is that they both starred Adam Driver.
Yes, it is. Like,
that's weird. Like,
they got a 2-for-1 deal on Adam Driver's contract.
Has that ever happened? Has a director ever and an actor ever had 2 films that they worked on together released within like a month or 2 of each other? Has that ever happened?
That's interesting. I can't think of any now. I'm trying to think of some.
Obviously, because of COVID, it happened, but that's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, that is kind of crazy. I can't think of any others off the top of my head. Write in and let us know if you can think of one. Okay, right. We're going to do it. We're going to talk about House of Gucci. So for those of you who don't know, this is a 2021 release. It came out about 2 weeks ago now, I think. Directed by Ridley Scott. It's a Stephen Levinson adaptation of a Sarah Gay Jordan book, starring Lady Gaga as Patrizia Reggiani. I'm not going to do the Italian accent the whole time.
No.
It's going to be offensive.
Patrizia Gucci.
Well, that's eventually. Yes. So she's Patrizia Reggiani at the start. Reggiani at the start. I'll just do it in like a Cockney accent and really lean into
you can actually use that accent. Yeah.
You muppet. And she is essentially a young well, it's an interesting performance from her. We might as well talk a little bit about it now. Because I think we agreed on this when we came out of the cinema. She's kind of bright-eyed and relatively innocent at the beginning, and she runs into Maurizio Gucci, played by Adam Driver. And I think the intention was for us to immediately be like, uh-oh, cash registers in her eyes. And you did say, you leaned across to me and said...
I didn't speak the whole way through the cinema, but I did make 1 or 2 jokes at the very beginning.
I don't want to throw James under the bus here. But it was mentioned at the beginning, the first line of Kanye West's Gold Digger. Because the first line, all right, not the whole thing.
I didn't sit and sing a whole song at you in the cinema.
So I think we're supposed to interpret her as being quite conniving and scheming, but I really didn't get that from Lady Gaga's performance. And in fact, up until like the halfway point in the movie, I was like, I feel like this movie wants us to have quite a, not necessarily sympathetic stance towards this character, but they certainly don't want us to be judging this character.
I felt similar actually. I think it's interesting to say. I will point out as well, we'll go into full spoilers. It's a new release, so we'll not do full spoilers straight away. Yeah. But I'll say, like, where her character goes, in the very beginning, her character was very similar to, like, A Star Is Born, I actually thought. And like, she was, like, this sort of bright-eyed, bushy-tailed young woman. There was aspects, I suppose, of her, like, sort of stalking, what's the Gucci that
Maurizio Gucci,
played by Adam Driver. She was kind of stalking him in retrospect. That's maybe what they were going for. But Konrad and I both agreed, and this is interesting. You're hearing our after cinema chat now on the podcast. We both sort of were talking about that. It was like a light switch going from her original character into the sort of more Gucci wife character. It was like a light switch. Maybe on a rewatch there would be hints, but it did feel like it came out of nowhere, kinda to us. It didn't really sneak up on you. It just came out of the dark for us, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I mean, so without giving too much away, this movie is essentially a sprawling kind of backstabbing political drama. Well, not political, but the politics of the Gucci family.
Family politicals,
and basically about this family kind of tearing itself apart in the midst of a succession crisis when Rodolfo Gucci, played by Jeremy Irons, who's Maurizio Gucci's father, dies, and essentially the kind of internal politics that go on, and but the kind of key narrative tension in the movie is that we know at the end of the movie there is going to be a murder. We don't know going into it who is murdered unless you know the story of what actually happens. It's based on real life, but that's kind of where we're going with the story. And I think the Lady Gaga's performance of Patrizia Reggiani is good, but I feel like the movie wants us to believe that there was a point where they were truly in love, and they depict things quite explicitly, like her getting married to Maurizio when they are poor, and not being not seeking out money at all, which
exactly.
It's fine. I have no problem with them doing that kind of rags to riches story and the riches corrupting them. But I think in this case they do a really poor job of explaining why the riches corrupt them, if that is indeed what they were going for. There's just as you've kind of alluded to, there's just a point about halfway through this movie where both of them just start behaving like dickheads for no reason and kind of stop loving each other. And I think I Ridley Scott movies are sometimes guilty, certainly ones that he's made in the last 20 years, are often guilty of this for me. The Martian is another one, where it's like, it seems fine on the surface, but as soon as you start actually thinking about what the characters are doing and kind of looking for some kind of believable emotional drive for the characters, it's like, none of this really makes that much sense. It kind of passes as a squint test, but there isn't actually that much going on beneath the surface of this movie, and I think that's true here too.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I actually think that this is a really confused movie. I think that Ridley Scott doesn't really know what he's trying to do. There's aspects of it trying to be like a Paul Thomas Anderson, very sort of stripped back character study. There's aspects of it trying to be...
it's almost like a Coen Brothers movie at times, with the comedy that they try to introduce into like a dark drama.
Exactly.
We'll maybe talk about that a bit more when we get to Jared Leto's performance.
Well, I was going to allude to that slightly here, is that, yes, it comes across a little bit like that to me. Like it's a very confused thing. It's sort of like trying to be a sort of a stripped back character study, like a Paul Thomas Anderson, with Coen Brothers aspects in there as well, with the comedy aspects in there. But at the same time, it doesn't really have the character of a Coen Brothers film.
No,
it doesn't,
not at all.
And it doesn't have the artistry of a Paul Thomas Anderson film. So it's sort of in no man's land, you know. And I think that they tried to go for an awful lot and they failed a lot of the time. Now the two main performances, as we've mentioned, Maurizio Gucci as well as Patricia Reggiano by Lady Gaga and Adam Driver, they were very, very good, and I'm a big fan of both. I've only seen Lady Gaga in like one other thing, that was A Star Is Born, but I am a fan of her in general anyway. Just but Adam Driver, I'm a particular fan of. I think he's a very good actor, and I think they if it wasn't for them, it would have been very hard to get through.
Absolutely. They put this on their back, I think, and carry it for the most part. Okay, so essentially, the kind of, I guess, the early tension in the plot comes from Patrizia begins to push Maurizio to betray his family. That's kind of established fairly early on. I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say exactly to say broadly what's going to happen there. But as we've kind of said,
she wants power, doesn't she? And there is influences in her life pushing her towards that power as well. I mean, there is the introduction of the character Pina, which I'm sure you wanted to mention very, very briefly. Pina is played by Selma Hayek, and she is basically a TV mystic woman who Patricia rings up and asks, like, how am I going to get on in life? She does like a tarot card reading and says, actually, you are going to be very successful. You're going to be very powerful. You're going to marry a powerful man, all this sort of stuff. And it sort of alludes to, now we can do it very briefly here, but sort of alludes to that magic might be real.
I don't even think there's any doubt about it, to be honest. Like there are events that unfold throughout this movie which are cut with Patrizia visiting Pina in her house, and then also in like expensive spas and stuff. It kind of
they became very good friends, very good friends.
Well, and like kind of hinting that, and like that Pina is maybe exploiting her for her money a little bit. There's a moment later where she's like, I need to get revenge, and Pina says, well, let's go away on a holiday to Barbados or whatever it is and come back, and then we'll worry about that. Like, it's it feels quite manipulative, but there are scenes where an event is transpiring that are cut with Lady Gaga's Patrizia talking to Pina, where Pina makes Patrizia aware of the events that are unfolding. The implication
as if she has a screen in her mind looking at them.
The implication being that Pina is somehow aware of these events and is able to inform Patrizia Reggiani of them, or Patrizia Gucci at that point of them. it's just and it's a completely unfleshed out character. Like there's we know nothing about Pina until it becomes time for her to use her underworld connections to hire a hitman, essentially. The movie, and I think that's one of the things that I find really frustrating about this movie, is it's just such a fundamentally incurious movie with any of its characters. Like it's sort of like, okay, who's this kind of TV medium charlatan who's manipulating Patrizia Reggiani? Like, are we going to spend any time with her to kind of understand her motivations and understand their relationship? No, we're not. We're going to have a couple of cutaways where she literally just acts as a device to give exposition to that character and to the audience, and then she will kind of instigate the main kind of threat of the final third. That's all she does, and that's kind of true of so many characters in this movie, I think.
Yeah, like I didn't want to mention it earlier, but you mentioned like Pina hiring a hitman there. It's another thing that I felt like it was trying to be was like almost like I, Tonya, like, and like that,
yes,
like the underworld scheming of trying to, and it just didn't work. Like it's just a confused mess. But anyway, I've been there. It wasn't even like it was showing influences. It was just like it was trying to be these things, and
What? I think it's really interesting you mentioned I, Tonya, because I think that's definitely an influence on this. I think what I, Tonya succeeds in doing that this doesn't is it commits itself to being like, no, this is a character who did horrible things, but we should feel sorry for them because of the circumstances around them and the people around them that kind of manipulated them into this no-win situation. I thought I, Tonya did a great job of that. I think it's not even curious about Lady Gaga's character. Like, she's a nice person, and then suddenly she's not a nice person, and there's nothing that makes
nothing
it
about
like,
her childhood, nothing about her her relationship with her family.
Make me like her. She's just like she seems nice. Basically, that's all there is. That's all there is to it. Okay, so I want to talk spoilers in a second because we have to get into Jared Leto. We just simply must. The last thing I'm going to say before we do this, I think, is I wanted to get your take as someone who is married to someone who is a costume designer. I'm not like a seamster or whatever the term for a male.
We say actor for everyone, so let's say seamstress for everyone.
Sure, okay, I'm not a seamstress. But the production design in this, particularly the costume design, I thought was amazing. I thought that was the one thing about the movie that I was like unreservedly like, all of these costumes are amazing, particularly Lady Gaga's, but everyone was so well dressed in this.
And they sort of had to be. This film about Gucci, which is like sort of the fashion world, it sort of had to be. And I agree with you. I think they did really well. I really liked the contrast of the costumes of Jared Leto's character with the rest, because they were very contrasting, but they still felt as part of they still felt part of the whole. Not that everything about that character felt part of the whole, but the costume did. I liked it.
Yeah. And as you say, I think they kind of had to. I think that's the bare minimum, honestly. I don't want to, diminish the one part of the movie that's really good, but I think that's the bare minimum they could have done, because to be honest, the movie doesn't seem that interested in really talking about the world of fashion all that much. There's maybe, I think there's 2 fashion shows in the whole thing, and there's barely any mention of the products that they actually make, aside from a couple of minor plot points, which is...
It does feel, to be honest with you, like a film made for people who would have remembered that this being in the news. It's like it's like when we went to the cinema, most of the people in there, like actually most of the people in that cinema were like, it was like couples of, not actual couples, but pairs of women in their 60s. That's what it seemed to be most people who were watching this film. Like 2 women in their 60s going to the cinema to see House of Gucci. And it must be this in the 90s. They were like, oh yeah, I remember that being on. I remember that happening about their Gucci, and there's a little of the fashion brand built in there, and it was all mysterious. So they're going to watch the story of what actually happened in the news. That's sort of what I feel this film was made for.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Okay, right. We're gonna talk spoilers now. I'm not gonna get
Konrad,
too deep
before
into spoilers.
Before we do, I want to say, the fact that my wife is a costume designer or costume worker is not one of my qualifications. Don't put yourself down, Konrad. We have the same amount of experience.
Well, that is true. Yeah, I mean, you probably know better than me, but I'm happy
through
to,
osmosis. Through osmosis, I get it.
Through being around those sewing machines for as long as you are. They have like a kind of radiation that makes people aware of what a good cut is. Okay, so we are going to talk spoilers, but I'm not going to talk like full plot spoilers because this is a new movie. I don't think we really need to talk about what happens at the end of the movie, but we're going to have to talk about Jared Leto now. We've been putting it off for too long.
We have to.
Now, Jared Leto is an actor who I don't think it's unfair to say we both quite strongly dislike.
Well, to be honest with you, as an actor in film, I mean, if he didn't do the Joker, I might not have too much bad to say about him, except for this, obviously. But in real life, I just don't like the guy at all. There's the stories about what he did talking about I, Tonya, what he did to Margot Robbie on the set, which I don't want to go over again, on the set of that Suicide Squad film. There's lots of stories about him holding retreats for 30 Seconds to Mars, where he's basically like a cult leader there. There's a lot about Jared Leto I do not like. He seems to have a messiah complex. But overall, his acting has not really offended me that much, except for the Joker and, of course, this.
Yeah, I think... I'm trying to think what I've actually seen him in. I guess Dallas Buyers Club, I was kind of like, this is fine, but that seems like one of those performances that I might go back to and be like, actually, this should have just been played by a trans.
Yeah, at the time
actor.
it was like it seemed like it was groundbreaking, but actually in the lens of 2021, perhaps it's like, okay, he did that to get an award.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But I think it's fair to say, I'm not going into a movie where Jared Leto's in it being like, I can't wait to see Jared. I can't wait to see what he gets up to.
He's not a draw.
With that said, I went into this movie like a kid on Christmas Eve because I had seen some clips of Jared Leto's performance on Twitter, and I whispered in kind of like reverent tones to Anthony while we sat down before the film had started that like, I've heard that Jared Leto's performance in this is one of the funniest things about the movie, and it is not an exaggeration.
Yeah.
It's not an exaggeration to say that this is the hardest I have laughed at a movie in years, maybe decades, to be honest.
Boof.
Jared Leto doesn't know what kind of movie he's in, and that's bad in and of itself for an actor to totally misread the tone of the scenes that they're in, the way the actors around them are performing, but then for a director to allow that to happen is mind-boggling. So the best way I can describe it to people who haven't seen it, you've seen The American Office, haven't you, Anthony?
Yeah.
You know, I hate to reference The American Office because it's like, it's everyone who's incredibly boring's favorite TV show, but whatever.
Not mine. I'm very interesting.
That remains to be seen. I don't know why I say that. I've known you for like 10 years. Like it's not like the jury's out. Do you know when Michael Scott attends improv sessions and everyone's acting and having fun, and then Michael Scott interjects and says like, freeze FBI, and turns whatever scene everyone else is in into like an FBI raid, and they all just have to get on board. That's what Jared Leto does in this movie. Like everyone's having like,
that's great.
Don't get me wrong, there is like comedy in this movie. Like Al Pacino's performance is kind of ridiculous even by Al Pacino standards, and he was making me laugh. Like literally the first thing he does is he's getting a massage while he's reading the newspaper, and he sees that Patricia and Mauricio have gotten married, and it's like this comedic massage where he's like, oh, get my back, and he's like kind of like shuffling around, and he reads in the newspaper and he goes like, what is this? So it's like he literally sounds like Wario when he says
does
it.
sound like
ridiculous.
Wario, yeah.
And that's fine. I can deal with a little bit of comedy. That's not a problem. But he is like a shrinking violet compared to Jared Leto, who is he's just a parody of a human being in this.
Well, he feels like, to be honest with you, it's like in a comedy film that there'll always be that like. It's funny that even in a comedy film where everything's funny, they still have a character whose sole purpose is like getting a laugh.
Yeah.
Like they have comic relief within a comedy, So I'm thinking of like Danny McBride in most films he's in.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of like David Spade or Rob Schneider in an Adam Sandler film. It's like a character who, even though it's a comedy, their job is to only be as stupid as possible. Now, because of that, it's already a comedy. So therefore, the thing that they're doing is so crazy that it's not realistic at all. Take that unrealistic comic relief character from an Adam Sandler film, put them into this, and you've got Jared Leto. And it's not, there's no bridge whatsoever between the seriousness to him. He is that mental comic relief in a comedy already on steroids. He's Danny McBride in Pineapple Express in a film trying to get Oscars.
I mean, yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I think, make no mistake about it, his performance is the best thing about this movie. And the first half,
I mean, it is genuinely funny.
The first half of the movie, I was literally in tears at points, laughing at his performance. And there's you know, I think we both agree that when his character kind of takes a back seat in the movie in the second half, that's when the movie gets bad, because there's nothing saving it at that point. But I don't think he understands why his performance is good, and I don't think Ridley Scott understands why his performance is good either. So I've got a couple of lines here that I just wanted to slip in. I don't like quoting lines of funny performances because they'll inevitably not be as funny as the actor saying them. But so I've already said one. At one point, he refers to while Lady Gaga's trying to kind of keep him sweet. He plays Paolo Gucci, I should say, the cousin of Mauricio Gucci. And Lady Gaga, Patrizia Reggiani, or Gucci at this point, is trying to keep him sweet, and she's kind of convincing him that maybe he could put out his own line. And it's been a running thing at this point that he's incompetent and terrible and his clothes are awful. But she's complimenting his stuff, and he describes a costume that she's looking at as like a dream wrapped in lycra. And then they both dance. They both just start dancing, and it's like... not just, you know, like, not like a romantic dance, just like a like kind of dance. Like, it's just makes no sense. There's a scene later on where he's raging at them for having done something that displeased him, and he says, "Don't confuse chocolate and shit. They might look the same," which they don't, but they taste very different. And it's just like, who wrote these lines?
But Conrad, the delivery of that line is so funny. He says, "Don't confuse chocolate and poo," and then he takes literally a 15-second pause, and he goes, "They taste very different."
Yeah. Okay. So we've got I'm gonna try and do a kind of facsimile of the accent now, because everyone else in this movie is trying to do what sound like they pass the kind of squint test of Italian accents. Now, I've actually heard some people who know better than me saying his accent is actually probably closer to an Italian accent than anyone else's.
I'm not gonna lie, the one Italian person that I know more than any other Italian person I've ever met, he sounds very similar to this guy.
Yeah,
he's from Sicily, so I don't know if that makes a difference, but he is actually, you know, the stereotypical Mario. You know, when he wants to be. Obviously, when he's sitting just having a serious conversation with you, he doesn't sound like that. But you know, it's sort of like when I go into my full-on Australian bite. You know, it's like it's sort of like that. You know, but he's like that all the time in this film.
Yeah, but so I think I can't judge the quality of I can't judge the legitimacy of the accent. All I can judge it against is the other accents in the film, and it sounds nothing like any of them. Like, everyone else is kind of like, just, you know, fairly muted. You know, they're keeping things on a pretty low level, and then he comes in and he's like, "It's me, Paolo. How could you?" And it's just like,
that's literally how he sounds. That's not even a joke. That's how he sounds.
Unbelievable the way he sounds. Like, he sounds like a parody. He sounds like Mario, and even if it's the most accurate Italian accent in the world, if no one else in the movie is doing an accent like that, you can't do an accent like that because it won't make sense.
You can't go full Italian.
It would be like if everyone in The Departed sounded like Ray Winston, who was clearly just doing a Cockney accent, like kind of thinly veiled as a Boston accent, and then one person did like the most fucking Good Will Hunting accent in the universe. It just wouldn't make sense. But yeah, it's I can't recommend it enough for his performance. Like, it is literally a treasure to be protected at all costs, I think.
Honestly, I agree 100% with you. It's one of the worst things I've ever seen, but also I would watch it again in a heartbeat. Also, what I'll say is, as well, we sort of said boof a few times there.
Yeah.
Let me explain that to the audience here. So basically, they decide in the last 20 minutes of the film to give this character a catchphrase. So like 3 times in the last 20 minutes of the film, he uses the word boof
Yeah.
Boof. And
Boof.
Boof, boof, right? And what happens is, at the very last scene where he's in, which is this big build up.
It's a very emotional scene. It was
very
supposed to be.
emotional
It
scene.
doesn't work at all.
Al Pacino's doing brilliantly in it. Then they have to leave the room. They get like kicked out, right? And they get kicked out, and this is the end of their story arc. And he turns around after this big, like, sort of slow move out of the room. He turns around, having only been introduced to this word in the last 10 minutes. He turns around and says, "Boof." Yeah. It's meant to be this big thing,
and then leaves the movie. Yeah,
leaves the movie, and it's a catch. It is his catchphrase, like it is.
Yeah,
but it's only been there for 10 minutes.
But okay. Like the most unforgivable thing about that scene, I think, obviously the catchphrase is insane that they try to give him a catchphrase, and that late in the movie. The real thing that upset me about that scene though is that Al Pacino's character is kind of ridiculous, but that's his character's lowest ebb. It's supposed to be this moment where this previously warm and powerful man is brought to his knees by the machinations of the Gucci family and the kind of backstabbing, and
the owners of AS Roma Football Club.
Yeah, exactly. Those bastards. And it's this big, like, kind of Willy Loman moment where it's like, a man is not a piece of fruit. He's raging against the dying of the light, and you can't take any of it seriously because sat next to him is fucking Jared Leto in like a purple and lime green tracksuit, and you're just waiting for him to say some stupid shit, and then lo and behold, they leave the room, and he just turns around and with a face that suggests that he's about to emit some profound sentence, just goes "boof" and then leaves the room, and that's the end of the scene, and they're not in the movie anymore, and it's just like, how dare you do it? Like how I can't.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely mind-blowing that Ridley Scott made that decision.
Yeah.
Think of all the character exits from films, especially even just take the film Alien, all the exits from that film, and he gives him a boof, his iconic moment.
Yeah, this is the same guy who allowed Rutger Hauer to ad-lib the Tears in the Rain monologue from Blade Runner, and this is up there with that as one of the great character exits.
Although there was actually some ad-libbing. So apparently I did read that Lady Gaga, apparently that every film for some reason has to have something that comes out and they go, did you know that was ad-libbed? So the one that they said that was ad-libbed here was whenever Lady Gaga said Father, Son, and House of Gucci. That's apparently ad-libbed, which Konrad, you said, oh yeah, no doubt that's ad-libbed, as if like, yeah, it obviously is. But in my head I'm like, really, I could see like the Gucci family apparently hates this film, but I could see them starting doing that in their real life.
That feels like one of those lines that I can't see a competent writer actually writing, because it feels it feels like something that someone in like a Quentin Tarantino movie would say, where it's like incredibly stylized dialogue to match the sort of stylized presentation of the movie, and it works in those kind of movies. But in this, where everything's a bit more grounded, apart from Jared Leto's performance, it just stood out to me as like, I don't know. It feels like Aaron Sorkin dialogue or something. So I guess what I'm saying is I totally could see that in a script actually.
Yeah, exactly. No, certain writers could do it, but I just think that is something that the House of Gucci is going to take on. Although apparently, actually, what's interesting now, you will find this interesting, Konrad. I also read that apparently when this film is released, now I don't think when they filmed it was the case, but when this film is released, the investment group that's headed by Salma Hayek's husband bought Gucci.
Oh, really?
So Salma Hayek's husband owns Gucci now.
Wow, that's a conflict of interest,
isn't it? Yeah, it's interesting.
I don't really know how that works as a conflict of interest. It's like she needs to act good to make the movie show them in a good light, I guess. I suppose no. Actually, her character hates the old owners, so I suppose that's okay. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so everything that she does is in service of establishing that the new owners are far more competent than the old ones.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk final thoughts then. So I feel like I've kind of said my piece. I think Leto's performance is it's a very one-note performance, and I think it's like ultimately indicative of the whole movie in that it's full of like paper-thin characters played by actors trying their absolute best to flesh them out. Like, I have no doubt that Jared Leto was trying very hard.
Yeah.
Because you don't produce a performance like that unless you're really trying. and that's what makes it so funny, is that he's trying so hard and failing so spectacularly. What did you think of it though?
Yeah, no, I didn't have much fondness to say. You know me, guys, the Wii Borders factor, like, it wasn't really there. There wasn't enough sprawling green fields. They did go to a farm once.
They did.
They could have saved it, but it was mostly very concrete-y, very sort of modern buildings. So even in the aesthetic was okay. The actual story of the film, okay. It just felt like literally they were saying, and then this happened, and then this happened. I would have loved some more background for the characters. I don't really understand. If you're centering it around Patricia Reggiano, I don't understand why we weren't shown her past, why we weren't even shown her relationship with her own family. I want to see her relationship with her family compared to the Gucci's. Apparently, they had to cut out like 12 different Gucci siblings or something from this film. So that just shows you, like,
if Jared Leto was the one they left in, imagine what those other performances were like.
Yeah, they left him in to the story.
One of them is like literally Waluigi, just like wah, as he runs around in a purple suit and a cigar.
Yeah, I just feel like, you know, if you're already cutting out from the real story that much to the point where you're literally only keeping 2 of the cousins out of like 20 or something, I really think that you probably could have pared it down even more and actually put more work into the characters, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So overall, very, very average.
What kind of rating would you give it? Let's talk ratings.
Rating. Okay. Well, I'm gonna give it a 2.
Okay. Yeah, I gave it the very rare combination on my letterbox of, I gave it 2 stars, but I also gave it a heart, because as you said before, I would watch this again in a heartbeat, because that performance, I need other people to see it. I need to show it to people, because I can't believe that that's a real thing that happened. It is so funny. I
mean, Chris Pratt, watch out. That's all I'll say. I'm pretty sure we've got our new Mario. I
want the Paolo Gucci extended universe after this. I want as many movies starring this character as we can possibly get, and I don't want Jared Leto to ever be aware that people are laughing at him. Because
imagine if you were Paolo Gucci. I don't know if he's.
That's another thing. I looked up pictures of Paolo Gucci after this movie. He looks nothing like Jared Leto's character in this.
Well, obviously he's passed away now, but could you imagine, like, this is the way that you are portrayed in a movie, and this is how he'll be remembered forever.
Like, I mean, he was balding, and he was maybe a little bit on the chunkier side, but he's not like this fat guy wearing ill-fitting shirts with really long hair and like the crown of power kind of bald spot, like, that accentuates the long hair. It's just like, it was nuts how little it looked like him. But anyway, that's House of Gucci. I think we'll leave that there, and we'll end the show as we always do by answering one simple question, and that is, Anthony, what is your favorite movie this week?
My favorite movie this week is going to be. I didn't actually think about this. I mean,
I'll say mine is House of Gucci. So if you want to, okay, fine.
Okay, no, I'm going to say I, Tonya. I Tonya is a great film. If you haven't seen it, watch it. It's better than this.
It is. Yeah, I Tonya is like a better version of this, I think, in every way. House of Gucci, for me, just for the Leto performance alone. And that just leaves us to say thank you to Nancy Wyatt and Jared Iscariot for the use of our theme song. You can find links to their stuff down in the description below. And thank you to you for listening. Thank you so much for
sticking
with us for 50 episodes. I can't believe we made it to 50. We're almost a year through this.
We're almost okay at it. We're getting
yes. I would give us a 2-star rating. And we started on a 1. So by that logic, maybe in a decade or so, or 8 years now, we'll be up to 5-star. So stick with us.
Stick with us. It's a slow train, but we're the little engine. We're the little engine that could.
Yeah, exactly. We'll keep on chugga. That's us going uphill. So if you get involved in the comments, let us know what you've seen. Let us know if you've seen House of Gucci and how that performance affected your life. I'd love to hear it. Give us a like. It really does help. And subscribe if you aren't already. We are the Culture Cave on YouTube, and we're the best movie podcast ever on podcasting apps. And we will see you same time, same place next week.
Cool.